When most people hear the word nirvana, they instantly imagine some kind of eternal, cloudy paradise in the sky, or maybe just zoning out completely from reality. But the actual ancient texts, they present something far more practical and honestly a lot more interesting. Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving right in to demystify nirvana by breaking it down into two very fundamental concepts, the fire and the fuel.
Right off the bat, we have to absolutely shatter this myth that nirvana is a physical heaven you go to after you die. In the original Sanskrit and Pali languages, the word is actually an action. It literally translates to blowing out or extinguishing. Think of it exactly like blowing out a candle. It is not a place you visit, it's a dynamic process of extinction. So that naturally begs the question, what exactly are we blowing out? Well, according to the ancient Buddhist texts, it's the three psychological fires that are constantly burning within us. We're talking about the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion. Just think about your own day-to-day life for a second. It's our endless craving for things we don't have, our sudden anger toward things we dislike, and our fundamental misunderstanding of reality that just constantly scorch our minds and cause us so much suffering. Now, as we all know, any campfire needs wood to keep burning, right? These intense psychological fires are fueled by our very own physical bodies and mental processes. The ancient texts call these the five skandhas, or aggregates, but for us, let's just think of them as bundles of firewood. As long as that wood is there and a spark is struck, the fire of suffering is going to keep raging.
Here's where it gets really fascinating. The source material actually categorizes the extinguishing of these fires into two completely different stages. Stage 1 is called nirvana with remainder, which actually happens while a person is still alive. And stage 2 is final nirvana, or parinirvana, which occurs at the moment of death.
Let's start by unpacking that first stage, nirvana with remainder, and how you actually extinguish the flame during life.
In this profound awakened state, the destructive fires of craving, anger, and ignorance are totally blown out through deep wisdom and practice. The fire is literally gone. However, the remainder, the fuel itself, still exists. That means the person's physical body and their basic mental functions remain completely intact. The bundles of firewood are sitting right there. They're just no longer on fire.
I absolutely love how the ancient Pali Suttas explain this. They point out that for an enlightened person, their five senses remain completely unimpaired. They still experience what's agreeable and disagreeable, and they definitely still feel physical pleasure and pain. This totally shatters the myth that enlightenment turns you into some emotionless zombie. If they stub their toe, it hurts. If they eat a good meal, it tastes delicious. But they simply no longer react to those things with mental suffering or clinging.
The big takeaway here is that nirvana with remainder is a psychological reality in the here and now. It's a state where a person's mind is incredibly peaceful, yet they remain highly active in the world. Because they aren't burning up with constant attachments, they can engage with deep compassion and help others without getting burned or exhausted by the world's chaos.
Okay, but this brings up a really huge question. What happens to this fully enlightened individual when their physical life inevitably comes to an end? What happens when that leftover fuel finally runs out for good?
That leads us directly into the second stage described in the text, final nirvana, or parinirvana.
Parinirvana literally translates to nirvana without remainder. This is the event that occurs at the exact moment of biological death for a fully enlightened person. At this specific point, the remaining physical fuel, the body and the earthly consciousness, simply runs out. And because the internal fire of desire was put out long ago during their life, the flame is now permanently extinguished, leaving absolutely zero physical or psychological residue behind. To really grasp this, we have to contrast it with an everyday, normal death. For an ordinary person, unextinguished desires essentially act like a spark. When their body dies, that spark just transfers over and ignites a brand new bundle of firewood, triggering a brand new life. But for the enlightened being, because they blew out the fires of desire years ago, there is no spark left. The fire is just completely out.
And that is exactly why this next concept is so crucial: escaping the cycle and ending rebirth.
Normally, human existence is caught in this massive, endless loop. Our fundamental ignorance creates craving, this deep-seated thirst for existence. And that craving acts like a sticky glue that continuously propels us into new lives. But with new lives comes new suffering, sickness, and eventually death again.
It's like being trapped on an exhausting treadmill.
But because parinirvana means all craving was historically entirely wiped out, that cycle is completely broken. The equation is beautifully simple. No craving equals no rebirth. The underlying conditions for future suffering are destroyed once and for all. The treadmill finally comes to a stop, marking complete and total liberation.
So let's bring this all together and talk about peace in the present and why this is about freedom, not nihilism.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. Is this whole philosophy just a really dark, depressing way of saying we should all just want to disappear into nothingness? Absolutely not. The ancient sources are incredibly clear that we should never ever mistake nirvana for pessimistic nihilism. Annihilationism, the idea that you just die and become nothing, was actually entirely rejected by the Buddha. Nirvana is, instead, framed as ultimate liberation. It is a joyful, peaceful unbinding from the heavy, suffocating chains of mental turmoil.
The absolutely crucial point to remember here is that whether it's nirvana with remainder experienced as profound active peace during your daily life, or parinirvana without remainder at the end of physical existence, nirvana is not an escape from life. It is the absolute, definitive extinction of life's self-inflicted misery. It's the highest form of happiness, completely independent of shifting external circumstances.
I want to leave you with a provocative thought to ponder today. Take a close look at your own daily experiences. What specific fires of craving, anger, or anxiety are burning up your precious energy right now? And what small steps or little shifts in perspective